Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty, everybody. Thanks for being with me this morning. Excited to spend the next hour with you. As you know, if you followed my show for a while, on the first Wednesday of each month, my objective is to do a monologue. I've been going through the alphabet for the last couple of years, unpacking and dissecting and analyzing these different characteristics of certainty. I've been going through the alphabet, as I said. I started with accountability, talked about balance, composure, discipline, on down through the alphabet up to today. The last couple of months, we've been transitioning from our previous platform to this new one. Our shows are now hosted on Buzzsprout. They're also available or in the process of being reconnected and resyndicated with Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, etc., etc. I've been doing this now for about 3 years, and it's really been an interesting journey. It's been an interesting adventure, if you will. I've learned a lot. Had a fantastic mentor in Robert Cellino at Voice America. I've been coached with and by my friend and partner, Frank Hellring, and the list goes on. As I talk about certainty, though, all of us, I don't care who you are, how wealthy you are, how healthy you are, how successful you are, all of us are seeking more certainty in our lives in one area or another. In fact, it often happens that we are doing well in one area, but others struggle, or others are being maybe impacted or even damaged because of it. Maybe we're very successful at work, but we're a workaholic and our relationships are suffering. As I've analyzed these characteristics, I do believe, and I will say this, I believe they are complementary. I believe they are interactive. The more of these characteristics you can implement into your life and into your experience, the more they strengthen and expand each other. It's a very interesting dynamic to me. It's, we talk in our company, Certainty Management, our JV technology company, Certainty Global, we talk a lot about ripple effects. Recently, over the last year, I've been referring to it more as a snowball effect because it has this complementary, this expansive effect, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That can be referring to your business itself, your bottom line. It could be referring to your impact, your ability to make a difference, et cetera, right? There's a lot of variations and adaptations or applications of that. There's a lot of various outcomes. But I think that's why I feel so passionate, why I'm so intent on continuing these monologues, continuing this this podcast, this talk show, and continuing these interviews, because I do believe that it is creating a snowball effect in our experience, both within our company, in our relationships, and in our impact. I'm really enjoying it. So I hope you are too. If you've been following me for a while, you haven't given up on us yet. I appreciate you weathering the transition from Voice America to B2 Studios and now to Buzzsprout. I think it's going to be a good move for us. We have more control, more say on it. It's a very large company, so we're not going to have a risk of them going out of business or anything like that, and that's really important. My business partner, Frank Hellring, recently launched a new show that's also going to be on Buzzsprout and broadcast live every week and then uploaded to all the syndicated channels. His show is called Frankly Seniors. And that show is focused, obviously, on seniors, the challenges they're facing, the risks they face, the goals they have, how to make retirement more certain as well. This topic of certainty is pretty far reaching. As I said, it's a goal and objective for most of us in most areas of our life. And again, I don't care how successful you are, most of us are still looking for more certainty in some areas. We may be really good at one or two, but there's others that we're working on improving. I most certainly am. So anyway, today we are continuing our A to Z exploration as we go through the alphabet, these principles that help us build and nurture and expand the certainty in our lives, in our relationships, and our work. And it has been quite a journey, right? It's really amazing how you learn more when you are the teacher. I'm this self-professed expert in certainty. I'm trying to be, and yet I've learned so much by unpacking these topics and these characteristics, right? I'm learning more about them myself as I study them and think about them and talk about them. As I have interviews with various experts that I feel are doing a really good job of building certainty in their lives and the lives of others. And the teacher always learns the most, right? And so I'm very grateful for this experience. I'm grateful for the lessons I'm learning, and I'm grateful for you following along and giving me your support. And hopefully, my goal, my hope is that you're sharing these insights with others, so we can increase that snowball effect of more and more certainty throughout the world. The very first monologue I did, as you've heard me say before, was on the topic of certainty. I had a guest who couldn't get on in the last minute, and we ended up I ended up having to do it on my own with no notice. I had about 2 minutes notice. We were going live, and so I ended up just talking on 3 principles of certainty. This was in July of, I guess it would have been 2023 now. I enjoyed it so much that I did another one in November about gratitude. And that's when I made the decision to start doing a weekly monologue. And as I look back on them, let me run through the topics for you. So if you're new to the show, or if you've been out of the loop a little bit, the first one I did was certainty, then gratitude. Then I started to go through the alphabet. I did accountability, balance, composure, discipline. Let's see. E was endurance. F was faith. G was giving. It's a principle of certainty. Are you giving or taking it? Do you have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? H, I believe, was humor. I was integrity. J was joy. Do you find joy in your life? I remember the movie The Dead Poets Society, where Robin Williams, the professor, or the teacher at the boys' school, talked about sucking the marrow out of life. I think it's a great principle of certainty. K, I talked about kindness. L was at Christmas time. I talked about light. Kicked off the new year with our new partner that we were with shortly before they announced that they were actually closing their doors. But I kicked off the new year with the word M is for momentum. Talking about ripple effects, talking about snowball effects. You start to build momentum, and not only does it become very exciting, right? Very contagious. It becomes, I think, attractive. It starts to attract more of the same into your life. In N, I gave one about next, and it really talked about what do we do when we're making a transition, when a tragedy happens, when we make a big decision. What do we do next? And I talked about looking forward, planning, preparing, recalculating, right, as we run into challenges. In O, I talked about openness. O is about being transparent, being an open book, being open to input, etc., etc. P, if I'm remembering right, I spoke about patience. I think it's an important principle when it comes to certainty. And that takes us to today, right? Q was a hard one to come up with. There aren't a lot of options out there. I had to think long and hard. I had to Google it or Chat GPT it and try to come up with some ideas. But ultimately, I decided to talk about quiet confidence. I know that's cheating a little bit, but it's my show. I guess I can do what I want. But I spoke back in H. Oh, I stand corrected. H, I talked about humility, not humor. Humor was a contender. I thought about humor. I think it's important to incorporate humor and the ability to laugh both at life and at ourselves. That was probably when I do a second series as I go through the alphabet. There were always the first contender, second contenders, and H. Humor was definitely a contender, but ultimately I ended up speaking about humility, how important it is to remove ego from our experience, and how much more we will accomplish creating certainty in our lives and in the lives of others. Well, humor is important. Humility is incredibly important, but I'd like to take that topic to kind of the next level, right? It's a principle that's deeply connected to and founded in humility, but often even harder to define or even detect. And like I said, it's what I call quiet confidence. It's a steady, calm assurance that speaks volumes without needing to raise its voice. Let me repeat that. Quiet confidence is a steady, consistent, calm assurance that is able to speak volumes without raising its voice. I'm going to unpack that today in the next 45 minutes, share several examples that I believe illustrate that, talk about the principle itself, give you a few tips and tricks and steps that I've learned and I'm learning on how to apply it, and we'll go from there. So what is quiet confidence? Just as humility isn't always apparent, it's rarely obvious, quiet confidence isn't outspoken, it's not overt, it's not obtuse, it's subtle, it's reserved. It isn't arrogant, right? It isn't loud or showy. It doesn't demand the spotlight, though it is often noticed and respected. And oftentimes it's interesting because people don't even know how to define it, right? Because it's subtle. Confidence of this nature it's really the self-assured energy of someone who knows who they are, what they're doing, what they stand for, and what they're capable of. And yet they don't need to prove it. It proves itself, right? So they just do it. They usually do it without having to talk about it, right? Without having to highlight it, without asking for recognition for it. Now, we all enjoy recognition, right? We all appreciate being appreciated, and sometimes that's a challenge when you're working hard and you don't feel like people are saying thank you. I deal with that sometimes. But confidence is a different thing. They want to follow. People want to follow a quiet, confident leader, even though they might not even understand why, right? There are a lot of different types of leaders out there, many compelling, charismatic, and hard charging. Yet the most impactful ones, in my opinion, the ones who are remembered for centuries even, who leave indelible impressions, those are typically those who brought about change in more quiet, yet inarguable ways, even indefatigable ways, right? And there are many examples from history. Let's start with the best one. Obviously, the most, I think, powerful and most persistent, most compelling and perfect example was Jesus Christ. He was the epitome of this, as with all things. He didn't need a megaphone to make an impact. He served and made a difference with the perfect example of quiet confidence. Really, the only time I can think of when he got angry, or at least seemed to raise his voice a little bit, was the day he cleared the temple. Remember when he was in the courtyard and he cleared out the money changers? If you haven't seen the series The Chosen, I highly recommend you check it out. They do a great job of illustrating his life and his story, including this integral scene, right? I can picture him doing this, though, even without shouting or losing his temper, without losing control. He may have been firm, he may have been serious, but I can't imagine him screaming it or even yelling as he did it. Truly, I believe, more than any of us, he was the perfect example of just quietly, confidently leading, guiding, and touching everyone around him. And as we know, he changed the world in the process. He knew who he was. He knew why he was there. He knew what his purpose was, what he had to do. He was meek and humble, yet also powerful. And I think we can learn a lot from him, a lot from his example. I mean, quiet confidence and humility are strengths. They're not weaknesses. Sometimes people think they are, right? I think that to be humble, to be quiet, to be soft-spoken is a weakness, and I don't believe it is. I believe it's just the opposite. They're actually two sides of the same coin. True, humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means thinking of yourself less. It's looking outward, right? Quiet confidence is what fills that space. It's the calm certainty that emerges when ego steps aside and self-awareness steps forward. Like I said, in a very real sense, this is what personified Jesus Christ. It's the same characteristic that we see manifested in many of the most impactful leaders throughout history. So I'm going to go through several more examples. Let's actually, that might be the best way to dissect this topic, is to look at several examples throughout history that personified this characteristic. Jesus Christ was the first. I think he's the perfect example, the one we should all seek to pattern our lives after. But there were many others since him that did a great job and gave us additional examples to look to and learn from. And let's call them our quiet, confident top 10, if you will. And I thought we could go from oldest to youngest, or oldest to newest, right? I think of Abraham Lincoln. He was born in February of 1809. I like that. I'm a February birthday. But February of 1809, he died in 1865. And obviously, his quiet confidence was manifested in one of the most difficult times in our nation. During the Civil War and beyond, he was known for leading with empathy and moral clarity. He didn't toot his own horn or have to be in the limelight. His 2-minute Gettysburg Address is one of the most powerful examples of this. It's one of the most powerful examples in history of brevity and strength. He didn't need to talk for an hour, right? He talked for 2 minutes, and it is an address we continue to remember to this day. Another example, he once drafted a really strongly worded letter to one of his generals, General Meade, and then he chose not to send it. I've done that before. I write out an email or a letter and just to get it out of my system, right? Just to think it through, purge it, remove the emotion. Maybe I'm upset or frustrated by something. I try to remember his example because the fact that he wrote it but then didn't send it showed great emotional discipline. I think it was an example of his quiet confidence. I do try to get things off my chest sometimes. I think them through that, without damaging relationships or losing credibility. It's a pretty good rule to live by. In cabinet meetings, President Lincoln he would cool tensions within the room with remarks like "one war at a time," and he guided a lot of discussions by asking questions. And he did it constantly without raising his voice. So he's one of my favorite U.S. presidents, one of my favorite examples of this. And not on the level of Jesus Christ, but a pretty strong example of quiet confidence. Mahatma Gandhi was another one. He was born in 1869. He died in 1948. And as we know, Gandhi led India's independence through consistent and steady nonviolent resistance. He was a quiet, confident leader. He believed that that was the way to effect change, and he proved that it was right. He did a 241-mile salt march in 1930, leading thousands to the sea to defy Britain's salt monopoly. And it sparked mass civil disobedience, stopped 100,000 arrests. Earlier in South Africa, he organized an ambulance corps. I didn't know this until I'd researched it, but he did this ambulance corps for both Indians and British soldiers during the Boer War. And proved again just how powerful it is to maintain calm morale under pressure, right? Literally, he was creating a service that blessed both sides of the conflict. And he's just one of my favorite quietly confident icons. Moving up in history, Eleanor Roosevelt is a great example. She was born in 1884, died November 7th. She was born on October 11th, so in about another week or so from now. At first, when she became first lady, she was shy. But she turned into this extraordinary human rights champion. In 1935, Mrs. Roosevelt toured impoverished coal mining communities throughout Western Virginia, advocating for aid, connecting wealthy friends with struggling families, and she did it all through vivid storytelling. Later, as the chair of the UN Human Rights Commission, her persistence, her thoughtful, consistent persistence guided the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights through some very complex diplomacy. She was a great example of someone who was a quiet yet compelling advocate, and she is remembered to this day for it. I've been to her. There's a park of hers in Washington, D.C. that's beautiful. I just think she's a great example. There's strong women throughout history. She's one of those that showed quiet confidence and brought about great change. One that you may not be familiar with, is not as well-known a name, is Bayard Rustin. He was born in 1912. He died in 1987. And many people probably haven't heard of him, but he was this really the strategic genius behind the 1963 March on Washington. Now, this is during the Civil Rights, right? This is in partnership with and in collaboration with Martin Luther King. He handled all the logistics, all the fundraising, all the coalition building, largely unseen, but totally indispensable. He was, in a very real sense, Martin Luther King's right hand. He was a COO. And despite being an openly gay black man facing extreme prejudice, right, for both his sexual orientation and his race, he just didn't give up. He persisted, and he really worked from behind the scenes in shaping history. He's a good example of someone who didn't toot his own horn, didn't need to be on the front line. He was behind the scenes, supporting the mouthpiece, who was MLK. Right? A great example, I think. Another example during that same time was Rosa Parks. Rosa was born again in February. Another February birthday, just like me. She died in 2005, so about 20 years ago. As we all know, on December 1st, 1955, Miss Parks, she just quietly refused to give up her bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama, when she was ordered to, which sparked the Montgomery bus boycott and much of what followed. She didn't yell or scream. She didn't get violent. She didn't get irate. She just quietly sat there in her seat. And her doing that is remembered to this day for her understanding, her persistence, for her quiet confidence. Beyond that moment, she was an active NAACP secretary. She planned legal cases like the Scottsboro Boys. She supported the boycott by organizing carpools, hosting meetings. As she later said, she wasn't physically tired, but tired of giving in. Sometimes we have to disagree, but we can do so without being disagreeable. President of our church recently passed away, Russell M. Nelson. He was 101 years old, and he was a great example of being a peacemaker. And he always said that you can disagree without being disagreeable. We can have differences of opinion. We can agree to disagree, but let's agree on the things we agree on too. Let's try to work together, work past our differences, and do so without raising our voices. Another example in history was Nelson Mandela. He was born in 1918, lived till 2013. So he only passed away about 13 years ago. Again, one of my favorite leaders. Right? I've talked to him on several of my shows. He spent 27 years in prison, unjustly imprisoned. And yet he emerged, and incredibly, he was able to do so without bitterness. I believe forgiveness is a key to certainty as well. If I do another round of alphabet, I'll probably do F is for forgiveness. I've heard the story many times, and I've really wondered how he did it. Right? Did he feel bitter, just not show it, or was he truly able to forgive and forget? Personally, I think it was the latter. I think he had developed within himself the ability to reach higher, to truly let go and control the natural man within him. Too often we give in to the tendency or the temptation to raise our voices, get emotional, attack when we feel attacked, or even just say more than we should. Nelson Mandela was a supreme example of self-control. And that's really what we're talking about here. When we talk about quiet confidence, we're talking about controlling our responses. I have a friend, I'm constantly asking him to lower his voice, to not be a bull in a china shop, to not be so loud and so outspoken, because I don't think it strengthens his credibility. I believe it hurts it. It's not to say we never feel hurt or offended or even irritated or attacked. It just comes down to how we respond. And the more we respond with quiet confidence, I believe, the more it becomes a part of who we are. And the more that snowball effect occurs, it gets bigger and bigger, and that abundance becomes consuming. That's a good thing. We may have to fake it until we make it, but over time it becomes a characteristic, not just a practice. And that's ultimately our goal, right? All of these monologues, these interviews they're about trying to make us develop the characteristics of certainty, not just the habits, not just the practices or the intent, but the actual embodiment of certainty. That's my goal anyway. I hope it is yours too. But Mr. Mandela famously said, "I have walked that long road to freedom, setting a tone of reconciliation." He negotiated South Africa's first democratic constitution. His president insisted on a 2-term limit, again showing moral clarity and also restraint. It says a great deal about the man so many around the world came to respect and admire, and he lived to be 95 years old. Maybe it's a secret to good health and longevity as well. I believe it is. Another quote, he said, "There is a universal respect and even admiration for those who are humble and simple by nature, and who have absolute confidence in all human beings, irrespective of their social status. May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." No surprise why he's one of my favorite political figures, historical leaders, and influencers in general, and there's many people who feel the same way. 3 more to go. Cesar Chavez. He was born in 1927, died in 1993. Cesar was an activist who led farm workers in California through peaceful strikes and massive boycotts. He remained nonviolent. He encouraged and promoted quiet, confident, nonviolent activation, nonviolent change. even though there were clashes, right? He dedicated his life to improving the conditions of farm workers all across America, with a significant focus in California. The California agricultural regions, there was a lot of abuse that happened, and he set out to help stop it. And he did exactly that. That's why you see Cesar Chavez street signs in almost every city in California and other cities across the country as well. In 1968, he held a 25-day water-only hunger strike to renew commitment to nonviolence. In 1988, he fasted again to spotlight pesticide dangers, both actions drawing national attention. Like Gandhi, he quietly led the charge and effected change on a national level, all the while advocating for nonviolent approaches. I love it when, we've seen a terrible example recently with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, of someone who took the opposite approach and went to the other end of the spectrum and became violent. And you've seen this almost bipartisan, unanimous response, with a few exceptions of some absolute just cretins. But for the most part, we stand behind the fact that it should never result to violence. There are a few idiots out there who say otherwise, and they should be locked up, in my opinion. But it's sad. We see great examples like this through history, and occasionally we see really bad examples. And I think all of us, no matter how we vote, no matter who we are, know right from wrong. Another example, one of my favorites, is Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. Right? He was born in 1928, lived to 2003. And, he was known for his quiet, soft-spoken, and gentle demeanor. Right? He was a much beloved television personality. And he was known for his subdued style. Even when he testified before the Senate in 1969, that was the year I was born, to defend PBS funding in just 6 minutes, kind of like the Gettysburg Address. It didn't take long. I mean, I love that quote. If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter, right? But in just 6 minutes, his calm demeanor and sincerity won support for children's programming for decades to follow. And he demonstrated how serene authenticity can move hearts and minds even at the highest levels. I love that. I grew up on his show, and I loved his example. One more. Angela Merkel. She was born in 1954, still living. She served as the Chancellor of Germany from November 2005 to December of 2021. And she was known and is known to this day worldwide as the Quiet German. She led Germany and the EU through multiple crises, the Eurozone collapse, Brexit, migration waves, and challenges, and COVID-19, all without ever grandstanding. She listened attentively. She learned swiftly. She adapted her approach. She really exemplified servant leadership, and she prioritized results over rhetoric. And that's one of the things I loved about her. My dad lived in Germany for a couple of years and speaks fluent German. And so I kind of track German things every now and then. I love German chocolate, but here's a really good example from her that we could all learn from. She was so respected and impacted, or impactful, because she did three main things. Number one, she listened attentively. And here's some lessons, guys. If you're taking notes, jot these down. The reason she was so impactful and effective is she listened attentively. She also learned swiftly. She was willing to learn and take input. Quiet confidence doesn't mean you have all the answers. Great leaders are open to input. They're constantly looking for ways to grow and learn and adapt and improve. I know when I remember this and try to do these things, I am a better CEO. I know I do better. Our team does better. When I'm pig-headed and stubborn and My way or the highway. I try not to do that, but sometimes I fall into those habits and we don't progress the same way. When I listen to Victoria Foster and Jill McCauley and Andy Tenney and Brian Pointer and others on our team, we do better. Like I said, she adapted her approach. Chancellor Merkel, she listened attentively, she kept learning, and then she adapted. She exemplified servant leadership that prioritized results over rhetoric, as I said, and she served for 16 years, continually trying to improve. This makes her the second longest serving chancellor in German history. And that longevity is very unusual due to Germany's parliamentary system, right? And yet she was able to maintain the confidence of a fragmented Bundestag, that's Germany's federal parliament, across 4 successful elections. That is a major political feat. And after each federal election, the Bundestag can elect or re-elect a new chancellor, provided they maintain the parliament's confidence. I can't help but wonder if her style was a contributor. Her quiet confidence was a key to her success. I believe that it was. And be that true or not, internationally, Chancellor Merkel was recognized as one of the world's most powerful leaders during her tenure. Okay, so let's reflect on this. These are the 10 examples of quiet confidence, and these leaders and these figureheads each demonstrated this principle in different ways, but they each most definitely follow this characteristic, this style, this modus operandi, if you will. Here's some principles. I think there's two main manifestations, if you will. One is these leaders favored action over rhetoric, over flashy speeches. They showed steadiness and resolve without fanfare. I think that's a really important point. 2, they had their moral clarity, this humble demeanor. It conveyed this inner conviction and unwavering belief in who they were, what they were doing, and where they were headed, in their principles and practices, and this guided them throughout their lives, still to this day with some, at least Governor or Chancellor Merkel, who's still living. And in short, their presence, whether delivering a short address, stepping onto a crowded bus, entering a hearing, or guiding a nation, carried profound weight without the need for volume or grandstanding. From President Lincoln's emotional restraint, President Mandela's reconciliation, and Chancellor Merkel's longevity, we see in their stories demonstration that true leadership is built on calm, consistent conviction and courage. So there's a modern business leader that I follow that I wanted to share a couple of lessons that she has that I think play into this, that I think are really important. I didn't do a break today. There was a lot to cover. We had technical difficulties at the beginning as we started just a few minutes late. But I'm referring to a lady named Natalie Dawson. And she teaches 5 CEO communication lessons that I think are applicable here on this topic. I guess let's call them some practical tools from a modern day leader, right? Natalie Dawson she's a powerful business executive. She's a communication expert. So let me tell you a little bit about her, and so you can know that she knows what she's talking about, if nothing else, right? Natalie is an American entrepreneur. She's an author. She's a business leader, best known as the co-founder and president of Cardone Ventures. You've all heard of Grant Cardone. She's the president of Cardone Ventures, which is it's a business consulting private equity firm that she launched in 2019 alongside both Grant and Brandon Dawson. They specialize in helping business owners scale, right? Scale their operations, achieve personal, professional, financial goals. They manage over $1 billion in client businesses and generate more than $100 million in revenue. Generated more than $100 million just their first 3 years, and all of that without external funding. So So kind of give you an idea of what they're accomplishing, and that I think she knows what she's talking about. She's born in 1993. She's not that old, right? Born in Ohio, she studied at the London School of Economics. She developed this really strong foundation in operational financial management, and she has built a reputation for her expertise in team development. She's trained and led thousands of employees throughout her career. But her leadership style emphasizes aligning teams and leaders with business objectives to drive measurable results. Again, she is about outcome, not rhetoric. She's an amazing speaker. I tried Googling her, Natalie Dawson. You can look her up on YouTube, and she's got some great speeches. But I love her style and her delivery, because it comes across as this confidence, this quiet confidence. She doesn't have to toot her own horn, as I keep saying, right? She doesn't have to say, look at me, look at me. She just says, this is how it is. And that confidence just rolls through. She's a best-selling author. She wrote a book called Teamwork: How to Build a High-Performance Team. And it's really this comprehensive guide to creating engaged and aligned teams capable of scaling businesses effectively. She also hosts the popular podcast Building Billions. It has a very large social media following. I wanted to mention her today because she seems to understand this principle of quiet confidence. She put out a video recently called How to Speak Like the 1% Elite. And I would go YouTube it. Go find it on YouTube. It's really good. But in that video, she shares and outlines 5 key lessons that reflect, and I believe reinforce, this principle of quiet confidence. First, she says, speak with certainty, not hesitation. Remember that quiet confidence doesn't mean you're tentative or hesitant. You're not scared. Natalie points out that people follow those around who sound sure of themselves. Phrases like I think, I believe, or maybe, they weaken your authority. I have to be cognizant of this. I have to remember it, because I like being a relaxed, down-to-earth, easygoing leader. And so I'll say things like, in my opinion, I think, blah, blah. But I understand what she's saying, right? That it does weaken authority. It does weaken your stance. Quiet confidence says, here's what I know, not here's what I hope. You may think you're being, communicative or even considerate. That's what I try to be myself, right? It's important. But make sure that while you're collaborating, you're also not coming across as weak, unsure, or vacillating. People want to follow leaders who are certain. My companies are Certainty Management, Certainty Global, Certainty Holdings, Certainty Veterans, right? It's our whole theme, right? If I'm not certain as the leader, then who is? Who's going to be? And how will we ever be as a company? So I think it's an important reminder. The second step, she says, first is to speak with certainty, not hesitation. She says, second, project your voice, even if you're soft-spoken. You don't need to yell, but you do need to be heard. Confident people don't apologize for their voice or their presence. They stand tall, and they speak with purpose. You can be gentle, you can be respectful, and you can still command the room. I think it's a good reminder. 3, she says, speak slower than you think you should. Fast talking often comes from insecurity. I think we all know this, and if we don't, we should. Slowing down, it shows thoughtfulness, self-control. It gives your words weight. The confident pause speaks as loudly as the words themselves. This is what I keep trying to tell my friend. I wish he could learn it. I don't know if he will. He's a lot older than I am, but it's important. But many people tell me that they like the sound of my voice, not just my words. They say that they find them, the way I speak, they find it calming and reassuring. I think that's a pretty good goal in leading people, negotiating or diffusing difficult situations. Maybe I should have been a hostage negotiator. Just kidding. But Seriously, if you think about it, could what you're saying be even more impactful by slowing it down, choosing your words more carefully, even thinking about the tone of voice that you use? My conjecture would be that it would. 4, make eye contact. That's really important. It's challenging when you're following an outline or giving a speech and you have notes, etc. But do the best you can, especially when you're just speaking with someone one-on-one or in a group. Try to maintain eye contact. Natalie reminds us that eye contact builds connection and credibility. When you look someone in the eye, you're saying, I'm here, I see you, and I'm not afraid to be seen. It's one of the most underrated tools of quiet, confident, impactful, and effective communication that exists, in my opinion. And lastly, always finish strong. Whether it's a conversation, a meeting, a keynote speech, whatever, confident communicators land the plane. They know their message and they close with clarity. Oftentimes a call to action, or at least a challenge, a statement of encouragement and faith, something that leads the conversation and leaves you on a high note. It's a reminder that certainty is built in the way you end, not just how you begin. Quiet confidence it's infused in all of this, right? I think it's a great reminder. Again, you don't have to be weak to be humble, to be subtle. You don't have to be weak. It does not make you weak. You are still can be strong. You don't have to be over the top. You don't have to be arrogant, egotistical, condescending, or just over outspoken. But you do need to end strong. There are pros and cons of this, as with anything, right? The pros are you really become a trust magnet. People trust those who don't need to boast. You're steady under pressure, right? Quiet confidence is grounded. It doesn't get rattled easily. If you are working with a quiet, confident person who loses it, who loses their temper, who raises their voice, and they do it rarely, it makes a bigger impact than if they do it all the time. And usually you should listen, because whatever they're talking about, whatever hit their hot button, is important. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right? They heard him all the time. Nobody believed him when they needed to. Another pro is that it inspires others, right? It sets the tone, allows others to feel safe, to be seen, and to feel supported. When you're quiet, confident, consistent, people respond well. They feel safe and protected. They feel confident in working with you. You also have to be adaptable, right? That's another pro, because self-confidence in general, quiet confidence, is rooted in self-awareness. It adjusts as necessary without losing itself. We recalculate all the time, but you stay true to your principles. You stay true to who you are, what you want, what you're doing, who you know yourself to be, and where you know you're going. You don't deviate from that, even when you have to make adjustments and recalculation along the way. I love this last thought. Right? I love that we are and should be rooted in self-awareness. And we can be flexible. We can be adaptable. We can be humble without losing ourselves. Right? It's the balance between these things that make for a really strong leader. I firmly believe that. Some of the challenges, right? You can be overlooked. In a world obsessed with charisma, and quiet strength can go unnoticed. And sometimes it can be misinterpreted. It's another con. Some may assume that you're unsure or timid, when in reality you're simply composed. It may take a little more time to be heard. It may take some extra effort to be understood, but in the long run, I believe it's worth that effort. It does require inner work. That's hard for some of us. So I think it's hard for all of us, right? Quiet confidence is earned, it's not inherited. It takes effort and time, and blood, sweat, and tears to acquire it. Nobody does it overnight. My question for you is, are you willing to put in that effort? Are you willing to keep at it until you achieve it, till you get there? It's a fact. It often comes from trials, from self-reflection, from heartache, and even tragedy. It comes from growth. And all of these things typically take time and attention. Many of us, there's another principle. I talk about patience. I talk about endurance. Some of these characteristics of certainty. Many people are too rushed or important, or self-important, or impatient to ever get there. And I think that's a mistake. Their achievements, their relationships, their health often reflect this. I hope you can do better. I hope I can do better. So there's some real world applications. Let me just share a couple last thoughts. We're almost out of time here, but let me talk about where we can apply this principle. Much of what I've been talking about is referring to leadership, whether leadership in a company, in a community, in politics, maybe even just in a group or an association or even a family. Your team doesn't need a loud leader. They need a clear one. Let me restate that. Your team does not need a loud leader. They need a clear one. Quiet confidence creates space for others to rise. Consistency is key. In sales, people rarely buy from the most aggressive salespeople. They buy from the ones who listen, who understand, who respond with calm certainty. And they most certainly enjoy buying from quiet, confident salespeople, people that sell without selling, without being salesy. They collaborate, they guide, they direct, they help, but they don't push. I also tend to buy more again and again, right? Because they like those kind of people. They want to do business with them. You can be dang sure that they're more likely to send you referrals if you exhibit this trait. In a family, as a parent or a spouse, quiet confidence provides stability. It's a really important example for our children. Your loved ones don't need you to have all the answers. They just need you to be present and grounded. Even kids, including teenagers. I mean, in my house, we had 4 teenagers at once in our household. They're now 19 to 26, but at one time we had 4 at a time. They need to see consistency. What they need is stability and resilience. They say that a soft answer turneth away wrath. It also helps mold children into adults who want a relationship with their parents and are able to interact with society better. It's not always easy, but it really works. And it has a long-lasting effect. If you can remember this and try to figure it out, it applies in marriage too, most definitely. I highly recommend a book called Bonds That Make Us Free by Dr. C. Terry Warner. It teaches how to avoid letting negativity and self-deception damage our relationships. It has a lot of this quiet confidence and self-control woven into and throughout it. They have a whole series, leadership and self-deception. The list goes on and on. But it's one of the best books I've ever read. I can do more in my experience to teach you how to do this, how to accomplish this, than just about anything I've ever come across. In adversity, this is the true test, right? When life gets hard, when we are attacked, pushed back, embarrassed, hurt, taken advantage of, or even just tired or frustrated. When we can remain calm and confident, even when we may not feel that way 100%, but when we can do that, our calmness becomes that lighthouse, that city on a hill for others to follow. Doesn't mean you're not struggling. We all do at times. In fact, they say that if you assume the person next to you is going through something really hard at that very moment, you're going to be right more often than not. Kind of puts it into perspective, right? We should have a little more empathy for those around us. But it really means that your identity is bigger than the storm. Right? You remain that lighthouse for yourself, for your goals, your objectives, your values, your mission, your vision, and for others. And as I said, they will follow if you can do that. Did a call last week, an interview with one of our partners in Certainty Global named Irvin Nelson. And he's been an attorney for 40 years. We were just on a partners retreat, and I don't think I've ever heard so many lawyer jokes. Irv was telling most of them. It was great. But in our interview, I'd recommend you go back and listen to it if you want to. Find it on our channel. Just go to Certainty Management on YouTube and look for Irvin Nelson. He talked about how we can communicate with people that we disagree with and do so in a way that isn't disagreeable, right? That doesn't build distance between us. It creates closeness. It doesn't raise walls, it lowers walls. We had this really great conversation kind of about his story and then about this topic. How do we work with people we disagree with, right? How do we agree to disagree and keep it amicable? One thing's for sure, we could get a lot more accomplished if we quietly and confidently could do this in our families, in our businesses, in our nation, even globally. Imagine the wars that it would avoid. So I love that. Just in closing, some last few reminders. You don't have to be loud to be strong. The most certain person in the room rarely needs to say it. Practice confidence without performance. Speak clearly, calmly, and with purpose. And let your actions whisper what your ego wants to yell. I think this is a lesson my good friend, who I love and care about, but he struggles with this. I wish he could learn this. I think it would change his life and his experience. And I pray it can. Final thoughts. Just in closing, I invite you to practice this. Practice quiet confidence in your own life. Whether you're in a boardroom, a kitchen, or on a Zoom call, take a breath, slow your roll. Make eye contact, sit up straight. It's a hard one for me. I sit so long, my back hurts. I start to slouch, but I have to remember, sit up straight, say less, and mean more. Lower your voice. It will never serve you wrong. As the saying goes, confidence is silent. Insecurities are loud. I totally agree with this. It's a challenge for me because especially when we meet new team members or clients, etc., we want to illustrate why we are a good bet, right? So we do share some of our achievements and accolades in order to establish that fact. But there's a fine line between boasting and highlighting. I think you have to sell yourself. You have to put forward your best, put your best foot forward and so forth. But I think the basic rule of thumb is usually less is more. And when you defer to others, you give others the credit. You compliment those around you. Edify your team. Comes across a lot better than when it's about me, Wilhelmina, as they say. Right? As I said, the basic rule of thumb is usually less is more. And when you're focused inward, not outward, it comes across as too much. It's too loud. It echoes in people's ears. When you look outward, focus on others, say less, I think the delivery is much better. When your confidence is rooted in truth, experience, and faith, you don't need to raise your voice. You simply need to speak, and people will hear you. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you being with me here on Finding Certainty. If today's message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please like it, share it. Let's help grow that certainty snowball. Don't forget to check out Natalie Dawson's video and tools. You can check her out at thenataliedawson.com. I like that, thenataliedawson.com. I'm not sponsored. I don't get any credit for that. I just think it's genuinely helpful. Maybe she'll even see this video someday. And thank you, Natalie, for your example and for your lessons. I learned a lot. Until next time, keep walking in certainty. And remember, the world needs more leaders who don't need the stage to lead. Remember, too, that certainty is out there. You can find it. We can help. Have a great rest of the week, everybody. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you later.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the certainty experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.